I never thought my life could collapse in a matter of seconds until I opened our shared cloud account. I logged in there almost every day to check documents, photos, work files, never suspecting that everything I considered routine would turn into a trap for myself. I wasn't looking for anything, wasn't trying to spy. I just wanted to download a photo for work, and that's when I saw it. Among the familiar folders was a hidden, new one, almost unnoticeable. And when I opened it, the world around me crumbled. There were photos and correspondence with someone I'd never heard of, with texts that left no doubt. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. My heart tightened with every second, as if trying to break free from my chest. I saw the name Mr. X, and text like, "Today, everything will go as we planned," and a photo that was too personal, too intimate to be just friendly. I sat there staring at the screen, and the world around me seemed to disappear. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe it's a joke. Maybe I misunderstood everything. Maybe she's just checking something for work. But every excuse collapsed before my eyes like a house of cards. I tried to remember the past months, and suddenly every strange delay in response, every unexpected meeting, every strange glance in her direction came together into a terrible picture. I tried to convince myself that this was impossible, that I was wrong, that I was too suspicious. I reread the correspondence again and again, trying to find at least something that would justify her actions, that would explain why Mr. X appeared so often in our lives, but found nothing. Everything I saw destroyed my inner world. I sat on the couch, unable to understand how to live on. I tried to think about logic, about what might be innocent, but my mind resisted. Every detail I had noticed before and dismissed as coincidence now became part of a huge web of lies, and I realized that I could no longer trust anyone. And when I started checking the other files, I came across another oddity. The browser history on her laptop showed searches for things like private detectives, surveillance, protection, tracking, how to keep someone safe from problems. I froze, and my heart squeezed so tight that it seemed I wouldn't be able to breathe. I tried to understand logically. Maybe it's work, maybe it's a joke, maybe it's not at all what I think. But when I remembered her meetings with Mr. X, all her strange nighttime calls, sudden disappearances, all those small details I had previously dismissed as work or friends, it became clear. I had been kept in the dark the whole time, and I was part of a story I didn't understand. For the first time, I understood that my former life was impossible. Everything I considered stable, that we built together, that seemed real and reliable, turned out to be an illusion that someone carefully preserved. I sat there for hours, scrolling through photos, correspondence, and documents, unable to stop the flow of thoughts and emotions pressing from within. I tried to tell myself that this wasn't the end, that there was an explanation, that it wasn't so terrible, but every logical thought crashed against the horrible feeling of betrayal and emptiness. I felt deceived, humiliated, and simultaneously broken. I looked at the photos and correspondence, at the dates of meetings and messages, and understood that trust was gone forever. Everything I considered our life, our love, was destroyed in an instant. And when she came home smiling as if nothing had happened, I understood that everything had changed forever. After I saw the correspondence and photos in our cloud account, I tried to keep myself together, tried to act normally, tried to act rationally, but with each day things got worse. I tried to talk to her about what I saw, carefully, without accusations, hoping that this was all some misunderstanding, that I had misunderstood something, but she was impenetrable. She laughed, said I was too suspicious, that I was seeing things that weren't there, that I was creating problems out of thin air. At first, I tried to believe that this was true, that maybe I had indeed gone too far, but every word of hers, every smile, every attempt to divert the conversation only strengthened the feeling that I no longer understood anything. I began to doubt myself, my perception, my memory. I asked myself the same question again and again. Maybe I made all this up. Maybe I'm deceiving myself. Every day I saw new hints of her hidden life. At first, these were small things: sudden meetings, strange calls, new passwords on shared services that she never explained. I tried to find justification, but rational explanations disappeared one after another. She assured me that this was all work, that she needed confidentiality, that it had nothing to do with me, that I was too suspicious. But the more she convinced me, the more I felt emptiness and betrayal. I began to see myself as a stranger in my own relationship, feeling that I was being held in a trap, that I was being gaslit, that I was being made to believe everything was fine when everything was collapsing before my eyes. Every evening I checked the cloud, the correspondence, the browser history, and each time saw new details that didn't fit into a logical picture. I saw her meetings with Mr. X, their strange correspondence that she carefully deleted from visible folders but left in hidden ones. I saw their laughter, their personal photos that were too intimate for friendship, and understood that my life had never been what I imagined it to be. I tried to act calmly, tried to gather evidence, tried to understand what to do next, but the more I understood, the more control I lost. I began to feel shame for not noticing this earlier, for trusting a person who knew so skillfully how to hide everything. With each day, my jealousy grew, and with it grew the feeling of humiliation. I tried to share this with friends, but no one could understand. They said that perhaps it was just a misunderstanding, that I was overreacting, that I should trust. But I could no longer trust anyone. Not friends, not myself, not her. Everything I considered our love, every moment, every laugh, every intimacy turned out to be not real, built on lies and hidden motives. I could no longer be near her, but I couldn't leave either, because everything inside me resisted: fear, shame, feeling of loss, emptiness. Inside me began to accumulate rage and helplessness simultaneously. I saw how easily she manipulated me, how I lost control over my thoughts and emotions, and understood that if I didn't pull myself together, I would completely collapse. I began to notice that every step of hers, every hint of secret meetings with Mr. X, turned into torture for my psyche. I felt that my life, which I considered normal and safe, had now turned into endless chaos where I could no longer find support. And then, after one particularly difficult day, when I saw new evidence that she hadn't noticed, when I understood that trust was gone forever, I hit bottom. I sat in front of the screen showing their recent files and correspondence, and for the first time understood that there was no more hope. I could no longer find logic. I could no longer find understanding. I could no longer believe. Everything that was destroyed. I felt that my life was forever changed, that I would never be the same person, that I had lost not only trust in her but also in myself, in my ability to see the truth. I understood that if I didn't pull myself together now, if I didn't find a way out, I would completely drown in this chaos. And this understanding, that I had lost control, that I could no longer believe, that I lived in a world where every fact, every meeting, every smile was built on lies, became the moment when I first realized the depth of my fall. After several weeks of nightmare, when I could barely sleep and every day felt like my life was collapsing, something happened that I never expected. This person appeared at the most critical moment, a colleague of my girlfriend from work, whom I had only seen a couple of times at general meetings but never took seriously. He approached me without warning, said he knew about everything I had seen in the cloud and that I was right in my suspicions. But everything was not as I thought. At first, I wanted to push him away, wanted to close myself off and say that this was none of my business, that I could figure it out myself. But his gaze was not aggressive, not accusatory, but strangely calm and confident, as if he saw what I had long been unable to. He told me that he worked as a private detective and that my girlfriend had hired him not to hide an affair, but to protect me. According to this man, I could have had serious financial and legal problems that I didn't even suspect. And she turned to him to keep me safe, organize surveillance, and control possible risks. He showed me documents confirming her requests to the agency, correspondence with contracts and plans, and every file turned my perception upside down. Everything I had seen in the cloud that seemed like betrayal turned out to be part of a carefully thought-out protection. He explained that he observed the situation due to legal and financial risks, not due to personal intrigue. Mr. X was a code name for a private detective in their correspondence, and all the meetings I had seen were part of an operation to protect me, to prevent potentially catastrophic mistakes with my accounts and documents. He saw all my actions through shared accounts and files, because for his work, he needed access to the same data to respond to risks in time. He watched not to control me, but to keep me safe, though I didn't understand this. At first, I couldn't believe it. My brain refused to connect my previous feelings of betrayal with the facts he was showing. I tried to argue with him, tried to find evidence against, tried to convince myself that this was another trick, but he calmly answered every question, showed all the details, contracts, and reports, and gradually my mind began to understand. Everything was not as I thought. Every hidden correspondence, every photo, and every strange meeting had a logical explanation. I felt simultaneously relief and a strange feeling of bitterness. Bitterness for being kept in the dark, for breaking down in my emotions for so long, and relief that this was not betrayal. Gradually, I began to see events differently. Now I understood that my jealousy and feeling of humiliation were caused not by real infidelity, but by misinterpretation of the situation. I began to realize that I could stop being a victim of my own emotions, that I could regain control over my state, that now I had knowledge of the whole picture and understanding of motives. For the first time in a long time, I felt that I could breathe, that I could see reality as it is, not as I imagined it in panic and pain. A transformation happened inside me. I stopped being the person who sat for weeks in front of the cloud, breaking down from jealousy and fear, and became someone who can make decisions consciously, based on facts rather than emotions. I understood that strength is built not on external confrontation, but on the ability to see the truth, understand others' motives, and act without self-destruction. I was no longer a prisoner of my suspicions, and this understanding gave me my first taste of true inner freedom. After I learned the truth from the detective and understood that Mr. X was not her lover at all, but a person who was trying to protect me, I faced the most difficult part. I needed to understand what to do next. I realized that my life had been destroyed not by betrayal in the usual sense, but by a secret in which I was kept for my own safety, and this made everything even more complicated. I felt simultaneously anger, shame, relief, and despair. I knew that I couldn't return to my former life, couldn't look at her and pretend that nothing had happened. Everything we had built together now hung by a thin thread between trust and apprehension. I began to gather strength in myself that was not heroism, not a dramatic impulse, but simple human desire to stop self-destruction, preserve myself, my dignity, and my psyche. I understood that I could no longer live in constant tension, in constant anxiety, in constant struggle with what I didn't understand. I couldn't allow myself to remain a victim of the situation, even if the other side's motivation was good. I needed to act. Otherwise, I would lose myself completely. I decided to talk to her directly, but not with the goal of accusing, not with the goal of making a scene, but with the goal of putting a period and regaining control over my life. I gathered all my emotions, pain, anger, disappointment, shame, and allowed them to be my guides, not trying to suppress them and not trying to ignore them. I understood that this would be a difficult conversation, but it was harder to remain in a state of uncertainty, in constant anxiety and doubts. I knew that if I didn't act now, I would remain a prisoner of the past, a prisoner of illusions and fears. When I met with her, I told her about what I saw in the cloud, what I felt, what I went through all these weeks. and how hard it was for me to see their correspondence and meetings. I spoke not to accuse, but to express my emotions and restore boundaries. And although I understood that she acted for my sake, there was still anger inside me for being kept in the dark, for breaking down, for losing myself. This was a moment of absolute tension, a moment when inside me it was decided who I would be next, a broken person living in constant anxiety, or a person who takes their life into their own hands and preserves themselves. And then I felt something change inside me. I understood that I can forgive, can accept motivation, can see facts and emotions separately. I understood that I can stop being a victim. I felt that I can restore trust, not in other people, but in myself, in my mind, in my ability to understand the truth and act from within, not under pressure of emotions. I felt that strength is not control over others, not evidence, not vengefulness, but the ability to hold oneself, one's boundaries, and one's emotions. At that moment, for the first time in a long time, I felt that I could breathe, that I could rebuild my life, that I could return my sense of self-worth. But simultaneously, I understood that this strength comes with understanding that some things cannot be changed, some secrets will remain, and some consequences will stay with me forever. I took a step toward freedom, but this was a freedom that requires constant control over oneself, constant reminder that I am no longer a victim. I made a decision that cannot be undone. I stopped being a hostage to others' secrets and others' fears, and now could build life further, knowing the truth, however bitter it may be. Life, after everything that happened, turned out to be simultaneously simple and incredibly complex. I stopped being a prisoner of my fears and suspicions, stopped living in constant anxiety, but this didn't mean that everything became easy. I no longer experienced blind trust that was part of our past life, and could no longer simply close my eyes to small things that previously seemed unimportant. Every encounter with the cloud, every new file or document I saw now didn't cause panic, but caused realization that I had become a different person, that I had seen a truth I previously couldn't accept. I was no longer a child who believed unconditionally. I became an adult who understands others' motives and accepts the consequences of their actions, even if they caused pain. I continued to live with her nearby, but our relationship was never the same. We were able to discuss everything openly. We were able to talk through motives, explain fears, our experiences, and our mistakes. But the understanding that trust can be violated even for good purposes left a scar inside me. Sometimes I look at her and see not only a person who tried to protect me, but also a person who knew how to keep secrets, manage information, make decisions without me, and this feeling causes simultaneously respect and caution. I learned to distinguish between actions and their motives, and this gave me strength, but also left a feeling that absolute safety doesn't exist. My inner state was now built on a new principle. I can control only myself, my reactions, my decisions, my boundaries. I can forgive, I can understand, but I cannot forget. I can trust, but only with conscious caution. I understood that sometimes good can come through difficult, painful paths, that people's actions that seem like betrayal can be an act of protection, and that inner peace doesn't come through the illusion of trust, but through clarity and control over oneself. I began to see life as a chain of choices, where every choice carries responsibility and consequences, and where your strength is determined not by the situation, but by how you perceive it and what you react to. But along with this understanding comes a moral dilemma that never fully disappears. I know the truth, I know the motives, but what to do with the past? Should I completely let go of the pain I experienced? Should I allow myself to believe that a person who kept me in the dark for my own safety deserves forgiveness without remainder? And how to live with the understanding that trust will never be the same, that some actions will remain inside me as scars, reminding that reality is more complex than it seems at first glance. Every day I face these questions. I live, breathe, work, build new habits, try not to repeat old mistakes. But sometimes, when I see their correspondence or documents, I remember how close I was to complete destruction, how easily one can lose oneself if one doesn't maintain control over one's thoughts and emotions. I understood that life after betrayal is not closure, not a perfect ending. It is constant work on oneself, constant distinction between facts and emotions, constant understanding that truth is more complex than it seems, and that sometimes salvation comes through a lie that looks like betrayal. I don't know if it will ever become easier. I don't know if trust will return fully. But I know one thing. I am no longer a victim. I live my life. I maintain control over myself. I can make decisions consciously, and this gives me a sense of strength that cannot be taken away. And sometimes I think that perhaps true devotion and protection are not always visible immediately, and that sometimes survival and care go through the most unexpected, most painful paths, leaving behind questions without answers, but leaving the possibility to be strong and preserve oneself even after destruction, even after betrayal, even after a truth that breaks life.